But suppose you use that money to give out a mortgage. Typically, a 30-year mortgage has a duration of roughly 15 years. Well, let's say 14. If the yields on those mortgages increases by 1%, that means you're going to lose 14% from the value of what you want to call the mortgage. If it increases by 10 basis points, you're going to lose 1.5%. When you are 30 times leveraged, only 20 basis points increase is going to wipe you out. Again, with mortgages, you get collateral and stuff, but we know what happened to the value of that collateral back in 2008. We were thinking about doing some sort of papers with a professor in Florida State. In 2010, not even 2009, we visited them down in Tallahassee. They got great barbecue and stuff, but there were so many developments, they were ghost towns. People bought them with no income mortgages, and they were down 50%. People simply said, bank, take the key. That's it. Of course, a lot of those ended up becoming crack houses and stuff, because drug dealers go into places where nobody has any rights, and banks couldn't, they foreclosed, but they had nobody to sell it to, so it just sat there. So that number is important. It's also even more important to shareholders, especially when it is high. When it's 1 or 2, 2.5 as a shareholder, it's kind of in my radar, but I don't think about it that much. As a creditor, that's the only thing I care about. And there's something else we're going to talk about. There is an alternative measure you can define. It's called total debt ratio. This contains exactly the same amount of information. It's total liabilities divided by total assets. Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, you can write that equity ratio as a function of TDR since I can convert one to the other easily. There is no extra information there. It's just a bit way of communicating that information. Since people already are comfortable with the concept of that equity ratio, we kind of use that. In terms of long-term solvency, these are kind of ratios for stocks, but there's also ratios that measures your ability to service the loan. Servicing the loan means being able to make interest payments. Are you making enough money to cover the interest payments that are due? And one of them is called times interest earn ratio, or the TIE, if you want to abbreviate it. Interest earn ratio. Tiers. Call it whatever you want. It's basically EBIT plus interest actually just EBIT. Interest is not there. Check the definition. How much money did you make before? I think it's just EBIT. Yeah, it's just EBIT. How much money did you make before you paid interest payments and the taxes? Because that's the money you use to pay the interest loans. You want this number definitely to be greater than 1. Okay? If tier is 1, that means you're only making enough money to cover the interest. There isn't anything left. As a creditor, I don't want that number that close to the sun. We want that to be much greater than 1, probably greater than 2 is a good idea. There's a famous index called Altman, or score called Altman Z-score. This is a score invented by a finance guy named Robert or Roger Altman. It is actually used as there are now better versions of it, but as a credit score for companies. And debt equity ratio is always one of those numbers. And I think times interest earned or cash coverage ratio is another one. It basically, if your Altman Z-score is high, the chances that you're going to go bankrupt within 5 years is very high. And that's known by empirical evidence. A slightly better version of this is called the cash coverage ratio. This basically says depreciation is not a cash expense, so I'm not going to have to worry about it. So you're going to calculate, you can do it in 2 ways. You calculate EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortizations. Add back the interest and divide it by the interest. Or you can calculate it as EBIT plus depreciation. Actually, that is EBITDA, I'm sorry. Yeah. Either way works fine. Recognizing that depreciation is not a cash expense, to what extent you're able to cover your debt service. That's all that means. It's kind of a refined version of times interest earned. And if you're doing this for a living, do not let the depreciation number be just the depreciation. There are some other non-cash stuff you need to take out, like stock-based compensation expense. Economically speaking, it may be an expense, but it is not related to cash, just like depreciation is not. So you can think of those as non-cash expenses. Again, remember, cash doesn't mean that you're actually paying it now. Cash in the sense that at some point the cash will be paid. You will never pay cash for depreciation. Again, you want this number also significantly greater than 1. Again, people also look at industry averages, because certain industries create more EBITDA compared to the others. So always make comparisons with the industry. Let me see if Yahoo also provides that. Let's look at the statistics. No, they do not. I guess if you're a premium thingy, you would, but when you're a financial analyst, you have access to all of these in a database. So calculating those is not too much of a big deal. I'm gonna, after mentioning other groups of financial ratios, I'm gonna stop here today. The next group is called asset efficiency ratios. These are for more like internal audiences. There's a ratio called inventory turnover. If I'm the COO, Chief Operating Officer, I'm gonna look at that number, and if it's going bad, I'm gonna fire my inventory manager. To what extent? Because you want your inventory to be as low as possible. We're going to look at things like total asset turnover. Then we're going to look at profitability ratios. The mother of all of them is ROE, return on equity. We also look at things like profit margin, return on assets. And we're going to look at price multiples. For example, price earnings ratio. Understand what that means. For example, price earnings ratio of 22 means if the earnings were to remain at their current level, it would take you 22 years to recoup in earnings what you paid for the stock. You can actually compare stocks based on that. It's a big asterisk, and we're going to talk about those too. So I'll let you guys know. I'll let you guys go now. Remember, by this midnight, it's your last chance to pick your Jeopardy groups. If I haven't gotten an email from you, I'm going to assign you to groups randomly. I mean, some of you have already done that, and you guys will know by close of business tomorrow what your groups are.